So I understand, Tarun, you've had a phenomenal 25-year career, starting with Goldman Sachs and then moving as an investor to NEA, MegaDelta, and now currently with 361 Capital. Would love to hear about your journey so far and what's driven you to focus on healthcare as a sector.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Great to be here with both of you. And thank you for the kind words. I think I'm very grateful for the career and the journey I've had. Got a chance to work with really sharp minds, very smart folks, great entrepreneurs. Although I would stop short of saying phenomenal, but thank you for that. No, it's been a great journey, and I think I'm not a trained. I don't have any background in medical science,
right.
But I just got sort of sucked into it. I got really attracted to it. I'm an engineer by background, and then did my MBA, and then I was happily doing public market investing in Goldman.
Yeah.
But I was very keen to come back to India and sort of get my hands dirty with what's happening here. And I did feel for that the real leaders of tomorrow were going to come from private equity. At that point of time, around 2002, 2003, public markets were quite shallow.
Right.
So the new segments were emerging and so on. So I wanted to get into private equity, and that's how my journey with NEA started in India.
Right.
The first deal I did in healthcare, and whether it can be healthcare or healthcare consumer combined, was MedPlus. It's probably in 2006, 2007, around that time. It was a Series A round, the thesis was just so simple that look, India has spurious medicines. We'll give you genuine medicines. It will be temperature controlled. They would be you'll make sure that there are there's a dispensing pharmacist in the actually sitting there.
Yeah.
And just by creating these small changes, we were able to create a differentiation, and of course it scaled up and everything went off well. But that got me interested in the opportunity both in healthcare and also in consumer alongside that. But after that, NEA, as you know, was very focused on healthcare back in their mothership in the US.
Yes.
1/3 of their assets were in healthcare across all categories. And what we learned with them was that, look, there is, yes, an opportunity in healthcare in India, and there is basic sort of shortfall in terms of number of beds are not there.
Under penetration.
And the penetration is low. But very early on, we decided, let's not go down a standard track of going after multi-speciality hospital. Let's try and do more differentiated plays, if possible. So we did some work in trying to figure out what those sub-segments can be. And this is like 2010, 2011, when all of this was, healthcare investing was same as hospital investing.
Is this when you invested in Nova? Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So Nova journey started in around 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
Where it was a daycare surgery chain, which was just a new format of doing the same surgery, because US has already gone down that path. 70% of the surgeries are in a daycare setup. And this setup that we had gotten the insurance qualification. So we knew that in a real estate expensive country like India, that should do well.
Yeah.
But shortly after, when we got a chance to sell that to Apollo, that's when we had incubated the IVF within Nova. And all the money from that exit was pumped back into IVF because there's just so much belief in that space.
Right.
And this is around 2014 when the Nova IVF journey really started. And this is sort of, we have seen that journey multiple times since, where it's a early to call sector, but you understand the dynamics work so well in India, because in India the value of having a child is just so massive. The societal sort of values around having a family is so strong. We knew that it's going to do well. And of course now there are, Nova is of course one of the largest players, and there are other more players that have come in. That whole single specialty chain has become quite meaningful. But that has been sort of, I think I learned from the best while I was at NEA, that let's try and focus on clinical differentiation, superior protocols.
Right.
And the other investments we did around that was sort of with the same theme.
Right.
Whether it was in devices or they were in diagnostics and so on. They've all been following that theme, and now in pharma that we're doing.
Yeah.
Idea is just India has the opportunity to do very differentiated stuff. Let's just go after it.
No, excellent. That's impressive. So you were able to identify some of those themes much early in the...
The journeys are lonely, as you can imagine. Sometimes when you're really going and trying to do innovative investing or backing some differentiated companies. but eventually it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
It's,
Since you've been connected with the industry for almost 15 years, 20 years, how have you seen the industry evolve in the last 2 decades?
Yeah, so I think one thing that has seriously happened in the industry is, of course, the quality of entrepreneurs has massively improved.
Right.
I think that when we used the initial investments that we would do, they were typically medical doctors, so they would be great at their craft, but possibly challenged on organization building, challenged on the financial aspect of it, all that aspect of administering and learning a therapy and a company. But now
They've got smarter.
They just really they talk the same language as us. Right. They track their metrics much more sharper than what a financial investor could have advised them on. They know their craft in addition to all the organization and the business aspect of it. So that is a serious improvement that has happened.
So in addition to the healthcare delivery, they understand the financial dynamics also.
Absolutely. So it's easier for them now to engage with animals like us.
Yes.
That because we are just now on the same wavelength. And in fact, sometimes I'm sitting with these doctors and they are doing more structuring than I can sort of imagine, right. which is around structuring of even the talent that they are hiring, or which structuring of acquisitions that they are doing.
They know everything about ESOPs and everything. Right?
Exactly. So they are doing call options and put options and all that. I'm like, wow, these guys are really on the top of their game. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other clarity that has come in is, just by doing good therapy at a reasonable price is not enough. You have to start really building a superior protocol from a clinical perspective. So
outcome based.
So they are starting to track a lot more data and starting to, of course, digitize a lot of their processes. But on the back of it, they are looking at the right numbers. I mean, we sit with I'm on the board of Kaveri, and those folks look at EBITDA per bed, profitability per department, what is the gross margins per procedure, all of that they look at it very sharply. And on top of that are the clinical metrics that needs to be looked at, surgical site infection rates, readmission rates, mortality rates after high-end, really difficult surgeries. And they are not just tracking it, they are trying to create good sort of studies around it, try and make sure that they are benchmarking with the best, getting outside intelligence in. So there is this very strong push towards trying to be the best. I think we always knew that Indian innovation in healthcare delivery per se has been superior outcomes than in the West. We can do more, we are more productive, we can do more surgeries, all that good stuff, but now they're really pushing that advantage forward. And then as we go into sub-segments, we see that, in pharma there is a big push towards doing more biosimilars and, 7 years back,
innovation.
They would do injectables 5 years, 7 years back, and they would feel they're doing injectables. Now they are not happy with that model. They'll be like, what's the next sort of gateway for me? I want to do injectables. I want to do really high-end stuff. I want to serve the biotech companies in the US. And they're doing that. So they are themselves sort of, getting up the curve very aggressively there. So that's the second aspect I feel that's happening broadly in the healthcare space. And I think thirdly, the change has been just the capital has come in and is recognizing the value that they're building in the system.
Yeah.
So buyouts in healthcare, we know, has now become really major. In fact, 10 years back, there were no buyouts. The buyouts were only in IT services or they were happening in financial services. There was no healthcare buyout 10 years back. Now it's the third largest sector in terms of buyouts. So large pools of capital has come in. They have decided to back this entrepreneur for all these reasons, and they're generating return on capital.
Confidence has gone up significantly, right? Yeah. So in terms of your investment thesis, Tarun, at the back of this changing landscape, a lot more access to capital, a lot more entrepreneurs coming into the game. As an investor, has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, I think we have been able to just sharpen our approach for each of the subsegments. And honestly, when we talk about healthcare, it just is now such a large space that it's, I can't even think of it as a single block, because of course we look at services and diagnostics, devices, health tech and life sciences all separately. But because of the point that you were referring to, that there is now depth coming in each of these subsegments, we have the ability to form a very sharp thesis on what we like and what we don't like. But the overhanging approach ends up being there has to be a clinical superiority to the standard of care that we are providing. So whether it's been on the product side or services side, we should be doing something meaningfully better than what the current standard is.
Yeah.
So for instance, after spending so many years at Nova, I thought I was done with IVF, but we went back and invested in another IVF hospital in Chennai. Just because, of course, we knew the doctor, she was a part of the Nova network earlier, but just that the clinical protocols are just so much better that she was having a success rate which is much, much higher than earlier that we were used to see.
Right.
And she's been delivering it in an integrated form. She's doing maternity as well as IVF, because people who go through IVF end up having complicated deliveries. So there is a maternity that's added there. We also do neonatal care. So there's a full sort of integrated care for the patient. And that combined with really strong protocols on the embryology side, which is creating great outcomes. So we still feel that in each sub-segment when we dive into, and in services, for instance, we really like super specialty for obvious reasons. Everybody's doing that now. We can get much closer to our therapy, which is differentiated and also delivering strong. Then the financial metrics, take care of themselves. The return on capital becomes strong.
That's a big shift to clinical excellence and quality of care. So it takes precedence because the players are there. There are enough people who are now getting into the game, right?
True. And sometimes there are situations, for instance, in another portfolio company I can refer to is on the services side, is when you are becoming the dada of one geography. You become the 800-pound gorilla in that state, and you just own it. And that's a combination of really having strong clinical excellence. Like Kaveri does very high-end quaternary care, like transplants in tier 2 cities in Tamil Nadu, and still generates very strong EBITDA while having affordable care price points. So that's the balance you can find if you have that brand value, you've got that name and reputation that you developed for yourself, and you're able to deliver that. So one is a business model shift where you are just dominating one space. The other is really clinical excellence down one very specific vertical on the services side. And similarly, when we, you look at other sub-segments, the idea is exactly that. Like how can we use, really, I wouldn't say disruptive, because in medical science or in healthcare, lives are involved, nothing happens overnight. Things slowly adapt and change, so nothing can be disruptive. But the starting point is that you are trying to really meaningfully improve on what that is. So if you think of it from as a tech example, we have invested in a company called Cure.ai. So that company, uses their AI software models to interpret and detect diseases in X-rays and CT scans, broadly in tuberculosis, lung cancer, and stroke. So in lung cancer, they are the only US FDA approved SMD, software as a medical device, that can do that. They work with pharma players, they work with hospital providers, and they can not just detect it at an early stage, which is very difficult because radiologists just miss because of small size of the nodule. They detect the nodule and they're able to do a malignancy score on it.
Right.
So that can be transformational from a cancer care perspective. And so pharma companies partner, because if you can get a cancer patient early, that's of course great for the patient, it's great for the pharma company because that's revenue for them, it's great for the hospitals. So we work with all of them, but at the bottom line is detecting that cancer early. So those are the models that are becoming meaningful. It's a company made in India, made for the world kind of AI, but really seriously impacting on how the outcomes turn out.
Excellent.
So, Tarun, probably switching gears a little bit, right? I mean, we were talking of, the business, the expansion. If we want to look at, say, the risk side of things, what would you say are, 2-3 key risks in the healthcare space that, you keep worrying about or thinking about when you're making those investments, or even post-investment, for example?
Yeah, I think so. One aspect, just to clarify, is since we come in growth stage, we don't have the standard risk, which is go-to-market risk or regulatory risk or the clinical evidence risk. We come in after all of that is established. So, for instance, even in devices when you're investing, those guys have crossed those hurdles and they are just now scaling up. In which case, the biggest risk for us and a lot of the diligence point happens to be the promoter.
Right.
From a promoter perspective, I would say that in India, generally in healthcare, if you are delivering therapy, you will end up with a good business. Whether it's a great business or an excellent business, that can depend on the outcome. But effectively you will be profitable. You generate money. So that's where promoter becomes important. That there is an aspect of always a lot of ethics involved when you're delivering medical care. And so that's where a lot of our thinking goes around the promoter. I mean, most of the investments that we do in, I would say, in healthcare services are really founders, who are doctors.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was just sort of talking about is that even our largest chains are doctor founders, right? So that's one area we really dive deep into, we diligence and make sure. And it can be on various aspects, right? The aspects of financial management, the aspect of how you're administering the therapy. Then there can be aspects of just corporate governance. So as long as all of these things are aligned, that's the promoter risk that I would outline. The second risk, which comes morely from our business perspective, is a liquidity risk. The company may be great, it may be generating profits, it may be growing at a steady clip, but you are just stuck because you are not able to get liquidity.
But that's more in B2B side, or when you say liquidity in terms of their working capital, or?
No. I mean liquidity for us as investors.
Okay, how do we get an exit?
Getting an exit.
Okay.
So, there are lots of examples that you would see where companies have generally done decently well, but there is just no ability to liquidate those assets or liquidate our positions, because either they are subscale, they cannot go for an IPO, and M&A is not on the table. Which is why a lot of the work we do is really having that discussion beforehand, that look, at the time of our exit, you'll be X crores of EBITDA, it's not going to work for an IPO, which means we may have to do a financial sale or do a merger. And if in our view, the likely way is an acquisition, but if the promoter is not comfortable with an acquisition, it's better to discuss it upfront and disengage based on that, rather than hope some investor will come and do that. Because what we are in the business of also is creating as many paths of exit for ourselves. So we don't want to be reliant on some financial investor coming in and buying us. We would rather have more. And in some cases, we can always take the call that, look, this business I know will be attractive to financial investors, so I feel that there's a good probability, I can take that. But in several businesses, we see that, look, it has to have an M&A. And if there's no alignment on the M&A, let's just park it. So there are a lot of great companies and very strong entrepreneurs that we have not invested with just because we didn't see a very clear path to an exit. And that's what we try and avoid in many cases.
And some of these risks, Tarun, do you see these as one-time risks, or is it a little bit ongoing, right? I mean, for example, whether it was financial or more on the sort of, if I call it technical side, I mean, what they do, the ethics part of it, for example, is that something that you need to constantly keep looking at, or, you've done the diligence initially and then it flows through smoothly after that?
Yeah, so I think it's, we definitely as investors or forget investors, as just fiduciary, semi-owners of the business, it's our job to just keep an eye out for all of these practices, activities, and that's where the board comes in, the independent directors come in, the committees that we form around audit, around governance, around all that stuff becomes important. The only practical approach I'll put in there is align that with the stage of the company. If the company is super young and you're just building the system processes, don't overburden them with a lot of that. Be mindful of what they can process. Each company has their own transition over years. When they are 100 crore to 300 crore to 1,000 crore, they take the transition. And there's no one size fits all. So the idea is, we try and of course have that goal post in mind that we'll get the company to that level. As long as the company is sort of heading in the right direction, we work together with the company. So our approach is to point them in the right direction, be partners, but not do by prescription or by dictate. You have to do this, it has to happen by next quarter. Because if you feel that they can't take that journey with you, then don't invest. Then walk away early on, it's better. And those business can be great business under the entrepreneur, which can be nicely privately held companies, great. But maybe they are not ready for a private equity partnership. So we have to be just mindful, and that's where the promoter becomes critical. Are they ready to take that journey?
Exactly.
Will that be a sort of a joint goal in mind, all that stuff. So there's a bit of that software aspect that plays in there.
Yeah, no, so I understand. I mean, it's very, very critical that initial due diligence on the promoter, so that it's very aligned to the way you are looking at growing the sort of overall business.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that we've seen, Tarun, in a few situations probably is, related party conflict of interest kind of scenarios, especially when it comes to healthcare, right? Because, there's someone who's got a great idea A and another great idea B, and somewhere they sort of interconnect or talk to each other, but you're not invested in idea B. So how does it work?
No, it's never an easy discussion. And to be honest, Indian entrepreneurs have struggled for it every now and then in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw a lot of the listed names that you see, they've all had several businesses, and getting them aligned has been a process. Even after getting listed and all that stuff, it doesn't happen in one single go.
Right.
So it's a reality of the market. It's the reality of the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs started something because fundamentally they might be just restless souls. They see opportunity, they go after it.
Right.
So you have to recognize that there might be those aspects that come in. You try and put adequate sort of governance measures around it.
Right.
That if there is absolutely you need to do something outside arm's length relationship happens, we try and put as much right layers of governance on top of it. But yes, ideally, it's you would like that alignment, that as long as healthcare businesses are concerned, and our starting point is that look, if you want to tomorrow do something completely different, first of all, we would ideally not prefer you to have an operating role as an investor. Absolutely, you can we can provide that carve outs. Especially when it comes to healthcare businesses, it becomes even more troublesome. So the idea is to keep it as together as possible, as aligned as possible. Sometimes in the heat of a transaction, you can't do it. You try and work on it after the transaction gets done. But as long as there's, again, I'll come back to the point, there's alignment. That, yes, I want to do it all together. I want to not create a lot of sort of multiple entities that will create issues when I do for an IPO and so on. So as long as that alignment is there, it again comes down to the promoter question. But in that context, the idea is timeline should be fixed. You cannot have it,
open-ended,
a moving target there. So you try and finalize that this is the timeline, this is what we need to get done, and then we'll go for an IPO. And typically, a lot of this cleanup happens around IPO times, because there's an external assessment that's also happening with the company. So usually it does happen, just that you need some external trigger for it to sort of people to crack the whip and get it done.
Good. So in terms of most of your investee companies, or when you look at companies for potential investments, the accessibility, affordability, has that significantly increased because of the government schemes like Ayushman Bharat? And what role is it playing actually to reduce the gap between under penetration that used to be earlier?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so on that, let me just take a step back on what we feel as the government is doing and how it might affect going forward. So one thing, in my opinion, is that the government has, I think, given up on the aspiration of creating assets like healthcare assets or beds for the population. 2/3 are still coming in the public sector. I would guess if you see the net beds added in tertiary care, most of them are coming in the private sector. Very little are coming in the public sector. So government has said, look, I don't want to really get into asset building. Maybe I'll do it in tier 2, tier 3 rural. I'll take care of that, but not in urban or tier 1. What maybe I'll try and do is, to your point, is create
schemes and
payer mechanisms
policies,
to make sure they get paid. So, and from the provider's perspective, what they are saying is, look, I'm very clear which segment I want to target, and these segments can be pretty. Bulk of the guys that we are tracking would be on the private side or private insured side, not the government insured side. And when we engage with entrepreneurs, what we hear is that, look, I am taking bets on state by state. In this state, the system works best. I'm getting reasonable price points. I'm getting reasonable collections in time. I think I'm able to balance that. And I'm going to target this mix on revenue. In other states, they are going to reduce that mix of revenue. So what the entrepreneurs have become very sharp in sort of now looking at
Selecting
financially is which sector, which category, which state. In fact, for hospitals, we see them all targeting a right mix of procedures. So how much should each department generate for me? That's what they're targeting. And on the back of it, they are figuring out how much capital I invest in each department. How much in cardio, how much in neuro, how much in oncology, how much in ortho. And they plan on the back of it. So one is the whole split of the department, but also to your point on the payers, they're also managing that quite sharply, that how much are we, and as the pricing changes, they also keep changing their approach to it.
No, so there are two parts. One is from a business point of view, you're right. They need to make sure that there are adequate, combinations evaluated, what would make sense from a business point of view. But from a patient point of view, the accessibility and affordability problem or issue that the healthcare industry in India has been facing for a long time, do you think that has partially been solved because of this government schemes?
It has improved. I've definitely seen that across states. I've seen that in Rajasthan. I've seen that in
So at least for the hospital also, the cost of acquisition goes down, right?
Yes.
Because you've got more footfalls, people coming in directly because they know they have access to the scheme.
That's there. That is there. So in fact, what the last number, and that's a big driver of our tier 2, tier 3 growth going forward would be that whole insured piece. I think we are tracking something that 2028 or 2030 we'll get to a 50% insured base.
Correct.
Right now, whatever, 30, 35. 50% will be split 50-50 between private and government scheme folks. I think that will take the question of affordability, out. That we already have folks who are able to pay for it, especially for the basic care. I mean, dialysis in many states is already covered for instance.
Correct.
Now, if you see the other aspect of it, as urbanization goes up, we are currently at 30-35%. As soon as we get to 40% over the next 5-7 years, that's when the access question also gets resolved.
Correct.
Because people will be able to get that care. So that's where the whole growth in the tier 2 that you're seeing, which is both happening in buyouts, which is happening in private equity, all of that will take a different momentum because of these two factors coming together.
Yeah, and also the point that I think at some of the earlier discussion you made was in a lot of tier 2, tier 3 cities, you've got entrepreneurs who want to exit because of succession planning. They don't have anybody to take care of their business. So consolidation will further improve the accessibility.
And on top of that, one is that this guy is saying, my kid is in California, he's doing a startup, he's not going to come back and run this hospital, sorry to sell it.
Yeah.
The other option is where large chains are saying, they are figuring out a young, good doctor saying, look, you are from Bagdogra, right? Why don't you go back and set up an own institute? I'll back you to set up an own institute there. Right. And that's where private equity or private capital comes in, where they get doctors to these places, which might be their hometowns, and allow them to set up a strong infrastructure where they can attract more people. Yeah. And that's where it'll penetrate. Because the big issue in tier 2, as you can imagine, is talent. Yeah. But when private capital becomes available, then these guys can actually take the risk and come back, set up their own institutes and their own department, 50-bedded centers, and those actually don't need to be a completely fully fledged multidisciplinary kind of centers. They can be really focused centers there that people don't need to travel far for it. So that flow is also we are starting to see starting to happen, backed by capital.
And in terms of the point that you earlier made was that in some of the portfolio companies, sometimes it's difficult to foresee the exits happening, right? Because of the liquidity point that you made. In the healthcare industry, particularly, what are maybe one or two reasons why the exits are difficult?
So the two reasons, or at least the broad reason ends up being that the company is not as strongly growing to attract financial investors, or not scaled up to attract financial investors, which means that you are not differentiated at all. You are, let's take a 200 crore hospital being a multi-specialty hospital, so no real differentiation, generating 15% EBITDA, so no great margins, and maybe one facility, single unit, so scale opportunities are much lower. you will not get a bid from a financial investor. So the only way to exit in that case would be sell to a larger chain.
Strategic. Yeah.
But if the promoter is not okay with it, then what do you do?
Yes.
So that's the
Deadlock
standard,
sort of.
and that you can see that in a diagnostic services play. Even in pharma plays, you will see companies which are decently 200-300 crore ke aspas, they are sized, profitable, and but they're just generating standard APIs which are not differentiated. So as a whom do you sell your shares to then?
Yeah.
So that's where the challenge becomes on how to exit these kind of companies which may not have any differentiation. In fact, in those companies, even getting M&A interest is difficult. Yeah? You have to really sell it at a very attractive price, and the promoter may not be comfortable with that. So that's where we see the usual sticky points around illiquidity. That if you're not able to foresee the buyer universe at that point of time.
Yeah. And any sub-segments for 361 and your current role, are you focusing on within the industry, whether it is Medtech or whether it is single specialty hospitals? Obviously, scale being an important parameter, some of the things that you earlier mentioned, but any sub-segments that you're more bullish on as a fund?
Yeah, so we have two approaches. One is the therapy-wise approach, and the other one is, of course, the sub-segment-wise approach. I think on the therapy-wise approach, we broadly focus on, 5 therapies, I would say. So we cover cardio, onco, neuro, gastro, metabolic, and so on, and ortho.
Right.
But when we start, and we can look at them both from a services perspective, which is single specialty services, or we can look at them from a pharma perspective, so domestic branded formulation.
Correct.
Around that. If you look at, but when we also look at the pharma life sciences place, we want to invest in companies which is seriously complex manufacturing challenges that they're doing. So the one source investing we did, that companies, of course, in injectable, they are doing biologics, but they're just very strong in the drug device combination aspect of it. So they have, of course, they have a great order book in GLP-1 drugs that are coming out, but they've historically just built that expertise, and that manufacturing sort of asset base that is needed is very it is a big capital base required. But also they've had this culture of quality just to deliver to very large global clients and flawlessly. So, and that comes over years and years. So it starts, these kind of things have a large gestation period. When they start delivering EBITDA, it just seems they've come out of nowhere and start delivering massive EBITDAs. They hit like some $50-55 million last year of EBITDA. But that's where the real differentiation comes from. So we like those kind of plays.
Global capability.
Where there's global capability, but manufacturing real complexity. So you can think of new drug delivery systems and so on. So for instance, things like hormonal products, for instance, liposomal products, they require really high biocontainment needs, high sterility needs when you manufacture it. So those kind of assets we like. Then when you come to the aspects of medical devices, again the approach is that let's try and do something differentiated. So one of my portfolio companies was Panacea Medical, which
You're still on the board, right?
No. I stepped off after we sold our shares earlier this year.
Right.
But that company we make radiotherapy equipment, so we treat tumors using radiation. But we beat the global majors on features. We are not a cheap and happy product. We are, of course, attractively priced, but we have better features. It's the first US FDA approved radiotherapy machine that has come from an emerging market. So that's the kind of devices we like to do, where you're really improving the
there's a differentiation.
The existing standard, because we have better patient positioning system, we do better tissue targeting, all that good stuff. But so that's what we look for devices, and that's why I think we've been hunting hard about it. I won't say we've been successful till now. We've said no to a lot of the suture stent kind of companies, but it's what we. So that's what gets us really excited about investing in healthcare, is something that can really transform what India is. And similarly, I think in diagnostics, there are a lot of sort of folks in India that have been scaling up. I think we would like to back the right entrepreneur here, which has the right model, given where the diagnostic industry is heading. I think it will be really headed towards much more. Right now, it seems a lot of them are Me Too, but it will finally get to a point where quality of reports, the quality of the chemistry you run in the back end, the quality of the radiologist, as much AI enabled as possible, all of that can create a difference.
But even in diagnostics, since you touched upon the operating model, is clinical excellence still a sort of question mark there, or because you get a diagnostic from one diagnostic chain and you get it done from the others, you don't still find the reports same, right? Both will give different outcomes.
True. Hey, diagnostic is something that when I started seeing it 15, 20 years back, it boggled my mind. It's like, it should not be so inconsistent.
Yeah.
It should be fairly standard, like you see in other parts of the world. I think the last metric I saw was less than 5% of labs in India are NABL accredited.
Right.
So that gives you a sense of how fragmented, unorganized part of the market that is. And all of them, have this engagement with doctors and so on.
Yeah.
So the way we are trying to look at that space is, can somebody really put the bar really high?
Yeah.
That I'm going to do everything which is best of the line. I will use dry chemistry to do that. I will have the best radiologist. I will try and get the best AI to assist the radiologist in getting the reports. So the quality of my reports and the quality of my backend, my sample monitoring, my QC systems are really top of the line. So that's what we would like to see in India come out. It's a journey, like I said. I mean, sometimes you see companies, you get excited and you chase them, and then you have to walk away and come back at it later. But that's our ambition. That if we can get something that can do some a real differentiation in that space, we'd love that.
Right. So I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, Tarun. So we are seeing a lot of tech enablement in the entire life cycle in healthcare. So is there an increasing focus from your side? I mean, you mentioned about this very interesting company which is doing something in the cancer kind of treatment space, but in other areas as well, are you seeing a lot of traction there?
So I'll be honest here. I always find his aspect of selling tech to Indian hospital a bit challenging.
Right.
It is, I've seen great entrepreneurs. They have great pedigree, great profile. They come in, honest effort at cracking the hospital sector and selling good technology to them. Poor guys really struggle to, the sales cycles are massively long and unpredictable. So I think the last metric I saw was, even in the large chains, there is probably less than 40% penetration or adoption of EHR.
Right.
Now that, and of all the hospitals that we have seen, we are on the board of, it's not very, very high in their priority that I need to buy the best in class product.
No.
They get to a 7 by 10 product by doing something in-house, working with a local guy, and it works for 70-80% of their needs at this point.
Right.
What they do not have maybe are the whole longitudinal records of patients that can really help them in doing the clinical decision support systems. All of that is missing. But their work doesn't really stop because of that they carry on. So this whole thinking, so it's a difficult buyer category to crack. It just takes a lot of time. The numbers are out there. They either say it's a $200 million market, somebody says $1 billion market, but I feel that for a great tech product, it's easier for them to go and crack the US market. Or outside India markets. So for instance, Cure does sell a little bit in India, for instance, their product, but it's, the bang on the buck is like too little. The tonnage they get by selling outside just makes it a easy decision for them. So I feel that India market will take its time. It's needed, definitely, and I think government has started doing these efforts of making a universal health ID. We'll see how that takes off. But it's, I think at the scale who come in later, we probably have to wait and watch. Maybe for startups, it's the right time to jump in because they can do a lot of aspects around it. They can do personalization, they can do it mobile first, they can make a vernacular aspect of it, they can do it. They can bring a lot more sort of play to the whole aspect, but still early days from a growth investor perspective.
Good. So thank you, Tarun, again. I think while we can keep asking you a few more questions.
No, thank you so much.
But in the interest of time, I think we'll probably cut it off now. But we would certainly want to continue understanding more from you over the next few months and as we interact to see how this whole industry moves, shapes up, and how your investment strategy changes. So thanks again, and
Absolutely, sir.
it is lovely
Great
having
meeting
you.
you guys. Thank you for
Yes.
Thank you, Tarun, so much for your time and interesting bits of information that you shared with us. Thank you so much.
Likewise, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.